I'm here today with Agne Nainyte, and would like to thank her for taking the time to talk to us. I've come across her profile in my professional network, and since the very first day I heard about the project or the initiative she was taking, I found it interesting, and I was following already even before thinking about this project. And when I thought about this project and kind of was thinking about the lineup of people I would like to start talking and put through in terms of stories to motivate others, her story was something that I thought would be interesting. So I reached out, and she was quite open to talk, and we scheduled it, and here we are. So thank you for taking the time. And before we talk about anything else, just let us know who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. So it was the same, I think, for me when you approached me and you told me about this project. I got very excited because I think it's a great initiative to spread the word more about the stories, how people make a difference in different areas and different parts of the world. So, shortly about myself. So, my name is Agne. Originally, I come from a small country, Lithuania. In the last 8 years, I have been living in the Netherlands. And in 2019, last year, basically, I decided to take a break from my corporate career and pursue volunteering with women in rural Uganda. So I think here today with Rui, we'll be basically discussing what I have done and how I made various decisions while volunteering there.
Yeah, cool. So let's pick that one. So I know I went through that process myself years ago, and when I did some of volunteer work. And for me, the hardest step is the first one. Is how do you motivate yourself to, and you don't necessarily need to make a career break, but let's assume that you want to make a career break. How you make yourself motivated to do that, and to start, and where to start, and what are the best causes to go after. So what was your thought process? Where did you start with this?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting one. I guess everyone has kind of their own personal thoughts and different situations. But talking from my own, I feel like last year, in the beginning, I was kind of bit, and I even called it millennial crisis. So, so yeah, for me, there were kind of many factors which led to this decision. But I think mainly it was about the way I grew up, and probably many people could relate to that. So I think at school we are taught to study well, get good grades, so we could enter a good university, and afterwards, of course, get a well paid job, ideally in a well known brand. And once you're there, of course, you would like to be recognized, get great performance reviews, maybe a promotion and a pay rise. And of course, I'm slightly bit exaggerating about this, but this was basically me. I think I was kind of chasing this type of model without really thinking of my true purpose. And I think also I was growing very fast in my career. And then there was a moment, which I called it millennial crisis, where I came and I said, like, okay, I think I need a break and I really need to think yeah, what's my true purpose and how I will proceed further. And then I decided to take this break and pursue my actually teenage dream to volunteer in Africa. And the timing was pretty good, so I decided why not now, because sometimes of course you say okay, I will do it tomorrow, but that tomorrow sometimes doesn't come. So I feel like sometimes if you feel something, you just need to do it right now. And I was also a bit feeling that I was taking a lot from society. So I had a good career, good job, good house, and etc. And I just felt like it's kind of the time for me to also focus on bit giving back more to others. So I think that was basically my story, how I decided that I will pursue this break. And of course, there could be different ways how you could do a career break, and there are many different ways. But for me, it was about going to Africa, having time for self-reflection, which I thought I will have time for self-reflection, but I was more focusing actually on executing the project, which I promised. But it still helped, of course, to decide what I want to do afterwards.
But just then talk us about the project, because we mentioned the project, we mentioned your career break. Just tell us what exactly were you doing there, and what experiences you went through that makes your life probably slightly better today, and helps you to think about your future.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there were lots of different experiences, which would be probably quite hard to cover in this podcast, but just just at a high level. So I volunteered with Integrated Villages NGO in rural Uganda. So the NGO is very small. It's basically founded by a couple of local people in Uganda. Realistically, they don't have any funding, so it's basically a couple of enthusiasts living there locally, and so far kind of surviving from a couple of volunteers who went there and also helped them to implement a couple of initiatives. I found them through a platform, Moving Worlds, which basically focuses on finding what they call experteering opportunities in developing countries. And they don't use the word volunteering, which is a bit more well known, because they say that experteering is more about giving your knowledge and expertise, and they focus mainly on that. And that was also my objective. I didn't want it to go to volunteer and, let's say, I don't know, teach English at school or maths or something like that. I really wanted to give my professional experience and help local communities to, for example, drive business and improve their livelihood. So when I decided to choose integrated villages, we worked on women empowerment project. And realistically, this was about working with two women groups and helping them to embed, let's say, entrepreneurship skills in their communities. So one of the group was making recycled paper beads, and another one was making other handcrafts from locally available resources. So for the first one, I was actually like, you could call it, this was kind of like a mini factory because they were producing a product. Of course, that factory doesn't look like what we would imagine in the Western world. There, they simply sit in a quite small room without chairs, without light. Yeah, with very basic, with very basic infrastructure, and still make those beads. Another group was even actually didn't have a roof, so they were always sitting outside on their own made mats. And making those different handcrafts. So basically, we worked, of course, on improving the product design, working a bit on the marketing, and helping them to sell the handcrafts locally, potentially also internationally, and also, of course, finding a bit more sustainable business partners. So that was kind of the idea. Very interestingly, what also like I learned in my business experience here, we I have this lean experience of on process optimization, and in lean there is this concept Gemba,
Hmm.
which means going to a real place where it happens. So of course, before going to this project in Uganda, I had many ideas what to do and how to improve, but when you go to the Gamba, so basically in my case, when I went to Uganda and I met with women, lots of ideas about how to improve that the businesses really changed, because you really face that local reality. So, for example, even if we develop a super great product in Uganda and then we want to sell it potentially, I don't know, in the Western countries, in Europe, US, the shipping cost is just enormously high, because Uganda is also a landlocked country, so it's
Hmm.
quite complicated. So you face lots of those different realities. So basically, one of my kind of conclusions after I worked with women was that in order to really improve the businesses sustainably, maybe those handcraft businesses are not the best. So what I focused during the time when I was there, to basically, of course, we increased the sales quite a lot with my absence there, because we sold lots of products to while I was traveling big around Uganda, and also to my friends here in Europe. But that was, of course, not sustainable after I leave. So we decided to save to save that money and then invest into new ones. So, for example, we established a new business which is quite already successful. So we bought an asset, event tent, for one of the groups. So that event tent is basically in Uganda, of course, you don't have that many like inside halls where you can hold like weddings, community meetings, or funerals, which happen pretty often in Uganda. So people rent
Hmm.
tent, because due to climate, you still want to have certain roof to protect you from hot
Hmm.
sun. So yeah, so we bought that tent for women, and now they are renting it out. So that's actually quite successful, because realistically, for them to get that event tent would be, yeah, quite hard. For another one, we introduced another business, which is also going quite well. So we bought a sewing machine. So now they got tailoring courses, and they started to sew different clothes for their own children, get some orders for the neighbors, or that we also now working on a project where they could make orders for school children uniforms. um, and then the third initiative was about buying piglets for women who wanted to start piglets farms. And basically, with piglets is quite interesting. I learned a lot about agriculture, which I didn't know before. After, I think it's 8 or 9 months, a piglet can give birth to other 10 piglets. And of course, actually, they don't use those piglets for their own food, but sell it to others. So it appears also a quite good business for women. And after the birth of a piglet, they also need to give one to another woman. So another woman can also start that business. So that was actually, just to summarize, it was quite interesting that, of course, I had certain ideas how things work before going there. But when I went there, lots of ideas have changed, and we quite adapted my plans, which I had before. And now we are working for the future a bit on other projects. So they are relatively small, but realistically, in a local scale, they make quite a difference to their lives.
There's something interesting on on this work you have done because, well, if you go out there and you start looking at foundations and you start looking at volunteers, there is often people goes to other places to do random things, which are of course good, because it's all helping is always good, but they are not necessarily sustainable. So you're there for a few weeks or a few months, and you do whatever you can do, but then you leave, and it's not sustainable when you left, as you rightfully said, for the local businesses or the local people to keep on going, right? But you mentioned something I find quite interesting. So you put a lot of effort to go there together with this foundation or group you worked with to make it sustainable for the moment you are no longer working with them, or at least not there physically, for them to keep growing and keep surviving, right? And I think that is a very interesting remark for people that wants to do these type of initiatives, is how do we use our knowledge, expertise, as you said, to help them not just on the moment but rather for the future.
And that's actually a very, very interesting point you are highlighting here. Indeed, sustainability. And I actually, yeah, I faced quite some challenges there, which I think indeed were sometimes maybe caused by great people who had great intentions to do there, but didn't think about what we call these unintended consequences. So I think it's indeed very important what you do there to really think about adverse or these unintended consequences. So just as an example, so for example, Uganda is actually a very beautiful country, which I would recommend everyone to go also there for tourism purposes to visit. They have a quite nice safaris and also mountain gorillas to visit. So there are lots of, also rafting is really great. So, but there are, so sometimes Western people come there and they get faced with this poverty, and indeed it can be quite shocking. So then what it happens, they start, feeling guilty, or I don't know, various feelings, and they start handing out money to people.
Hmm.
And they think they are doing good. Um, then what happens, certain communities, especially which are living near these big national parks, which have lots of tourists around coming, they get used to getting that money just out of like that. And then people start sometimes thinking, why should I work, because there are these white people coming from Europe or wherever, and they just give me money just like that. Then you get sometimes also groups of kids who start dancing, singing, or whatever, asking you for money,
Hmm.
and that's not good. So you really need to indeed think about what you do. So also actually with one of the women groups where I worked, there was a previous volunteer before me. And yeah, so let's say I'd faced quite some challenges there because the woman had an idea that, oh, these foreigners come and they buy whatever because, we are here poor women, and the white person comes and they just buy because we are poor. And when I came, I said, like, okay, if we want to do that business with these bracelets, we need at least a certain type of quality because, it's a product and there is a competition. And if you don't make a high quality product, maybe your consumer will choose another one. And because that previous volunteer was just like, okay, whatever, we got this unintended consequence, which was quite hard to work with that type of mindset. So yeah, I think we really need to think a lot once we touch something there, to think about the local context, to really understand people, and think what can happen out of your action. The same, there is a big discussion. So there are also many volunteers now going to orphanage houses around the world, and I think some years ago there was a big article, I think a research done by psychologists, that many volunteers go to orphanages and they feel they are doing a great job because they spend time with children doing great job, etc. But realistically, when they did the research, it was a really bad effect for kids because um, kids were getting a new mommy or daddy every month, so actually in the end they felt not loved at all.
Yeah, they were getting attached, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm a
So you
social
really,
scientist, so I always find those topics super interesting.
yeah, exactly.
So, but we just get you back to the discussions you were having before about the feeling of the communities when you just hand over money, and I think you agree with me that this is the case in Africa, but it's the same case in South America or in Europe
Yeah.
or anywhere where a lot of people, and this is nothing to judge people. It's more some people just if they if easy money is coming in, there is a chance that some people will no longer put an effort to make it sustainable because the money is flying in. And this brings me
Yeah.
to a interesting discussion that happens very often, which is has to do with the white saviors and people that are just going not necessarily to make it sustainable, but rather to make it personal branding. Because it's as you said, if I go to an orphan to a house where we have a lot of orphan kids and I make a few pictures, I live and that's it. um, so I have an opinion that helping is always good, but we need to help not thinking about ourselves, but rather what's going to be good for the people when we are not there. And
Yeah,
that's not
totally
always
agree.
the rational. And a lot of famous and influencers do not really help by this what I call the insta help happens way too often.
No, I totally agree. And I think, I don't know, yeah, probably some people indeed do that for personal branding. I think other people just don't understand and don't think about those unintended consequences they might have.
Hmm.
Um,
Of
yeah,
course.
but it's indeed a quite big issue, I would say. And I faced it a lot that in Uganda, certain people just felt like, I'm there to give money. Just because I'm coming from Europe, it means I'm rich and I'm here to give them money. And I heard so many problems and so many stories, which was quite on a daily basis, quite hard. And that's why actually I quite like this moving worlds work.
Hmm.
So the platform where I found this project, because that's why they don't even call it volunteering, they call it experteering. So
Hmm.
it's not about going there and giving money, it's about empowering them, giving tools, giving them your knowledge, experience, training, or whatever, that they can, indeed sustainably do something by themselves. So there is, I think, this saying that you shouldn't give a fish, you should give a hook.
Hmm.
So that's, I think, what we should try more to do it. But sometimes people, feel like, oh, okay, it feels so bad. Let me just give that fish.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, we think too much on the short term. Um, how long have you spent in Uganda?
I spent there 2 months volunteering with women. Yeah.
2 months. And I can imagine that is a and once again, not just in Uganda, but in so many other places. It's a big difference also the way you relate with people, right? The way the micro societies are operating in some of the places where are more marginalized. It's entirely different, and we come from often from these bubbles where we live today, where there's everything is almost there is granted. What was the experience?
Yeah, I think it's indeed an interesting point. So, so I was living in a rural area near Masaka city in Uganda. I was living in a family, precisely two different families. So on weekends, I call it, I lived in my weekend villa because it was a bit nicer house with a bit more facilities. And on weekdays, I lived a bit further. It's very interesting that I think around even 85% of Uganda's population live in rural areas. So there are not that many even very big cities. So everything is quite rural. And so it's very interesting. The first day when I arrived, when I landed in Uganda and I got picked up by organization, and we were driving through, and I was asking my coordinator, I was like, okay, so what is rural? Rural, is it rural? And he's like, well, this is kind of rural, but not too much rural. So I was really trying to figure it out. What was that rural? And then my conclusion was that rural Uganda is basically, you can determine that. So there are, there are kind of what they call highways. It's not like our Western highways, but it's still a cemented road. And then further you are from that road, more rural it gets.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my conclusion. But just a bit get you introduced to those experiences. So let's say in both families where I lived, of course, there is no tap water. So you fetch the water. On my weekend villa, they had what they call the rainwater tank, which
Hmm.
is quite nice. So during the rainy season, it's basically indeed like a kind of tank where they collect rainwater. Of course, it's not safe to drink, so you still need to boil it. So that was the weekend villa, a bit better house. But rainwater tanks is still quite a luxury in Uganda, so most people fetch the water. And the family where I lived, I think it was around 1 kilometer, maybe 1.5 kilometer, very badly that on the way back it was uphill. So water is a big problem, and for me it's still quite unbelievable. I remember listening to those NGO pictures and advertisements when I was a teenager that, oh, there are places in the world where you fetch water. And I thought, okay, maybe now it's better because I seen those 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, but still the same.
Yeah.
And I really experienced that. And by the way, I was not even in the most undeveloped area of Uganda. I would say even it was a bit maybe even more developed, but still people fetch the water. It's quite a hard job. Kids from 4 to 5, they already start fetching the water. They're very used and very strong to that. But yeah, it's a hard work, and of course you also what was also for me very interesting to experience that daily routine. So every day I was actually kind of working from morning to the afternoon, working with women, and then afterwards, I come back, I go with kids to fetch water, then sometimes I need to do laundry, help with cooking, etc. And just after doing those activities, you are really tired. You're really tired. um, so it's yeah, it's interesting to experience. And I remember once I was always doing my laundry by hand, so I really learned it. There is a special technique. The wash is actually very clean. Remember once I had a bit bigger pile, so my skin peeled off, and then they were laughing that my hands are not used to that. um,
But
but it was actually what was very interesting. It was not that hard. I don't know. I was also actually quite amazed. The first week was a bit more challenging for me, but after a week, I think I got adjusted to conditions quite quickly. So for me, it was also quite amazing how human can adapt quite quickly to that.
yeah, you know, um,
And I lived, of course, for a while.
um, so is of course in those experiences are you do it no matter how many times you do it, it's something you probably never forget. And I keep saying it doesn't matter
True.
where, it just matters that it's just something you'll never forget. And I went through the same myself. Um, If you are to summarize the overall experience, what would be the biggest learning you got for life, for the rest of your life, which is still a long way? But how could you
Yeah.
summarize it? Probably in one sentence.
Yeah. Oh, in one sentence. I think the
Can be two
biggest thing which
sentences.
I got, yeah, I think the biggest thing which I got was the gratitude for things. Um, yeah, I think in the Western world, we sometimes don't understand what we have. And I'm also coming from now it's a very highly growing country, but still 20 years ago it was different. Um, we sometimes don't understand what we have, and it's very good to get out of your comfort zone and travel and get a bit more conscious what is happening in the world, not only around your corner. And when you have those type of experience, when you get to know people how they live differently, uh, it's good, it's healthy, I would say. It's you come back here and you get a new perspective on so many different things, and I would highly advise that to experience for more people.
What about now? So you had this experience. I understand that you are still working with some of those projects more remotely, but do you have any intention to do it again somewhere else? Well, what now?
Yeah. So I think now I'm supporting Integrated Villages NGO as a side activity. So I think what I have experienced in Uganda is definitely not going to disappear, and I intend to support them as much as I can. So precisely, we are now working actually to launch a new initiative. We call it Seed Fund for Farmers. So basically, we'll form small groups of small-scale farmers and provide them with training how to utilize the land better. So it could be about introducing a new crop which will diversify the diet or focus on productivity gains by using new type of seeds or pesticides. And then the farmers will receive those seeds or pesticides as a loan. And after the harvest, they will need to return the investment, and we will start creating basically new groups. So realistically, and in a longer term, I would really like that Integrated Villages NGO would become kind of it would have some kind of stable financing, because now it's very hard that there are a couple of enthusiasts who are working there as a side activity, but they also have the jobs, because of course they need to earn some money, so they cannot dedicate as much time as I would like that they dedicate for the NGO. So in a longer term, I would really like to contribute that the NGO is financially sustainable, that they can fully focus on working on these various initiatives.
Cool. So we are coming close to an end on our time, and usually I like to close it by asking um, the people we're talking to leave a I wouldn't say a last message, but something for people to think about. Whomever is listening is and remembering that our mission is to not just to share the stories, but empower others to do the same and go out there and help by contributing with their knowledge, their experience. But I think it's important because it's why we are calling it "Talk It Through." That people like you can share a piece of advice or whatever that you think is relevant for them to start.
Sure. So I think maybe my final message, if you don't mind, it will be two. uh,
No, it's okay.
but one is very short. So, firstly, I would say really never feel too small to make a change. I've meet many people who don't even want to see that poverty, because indeed it's very uncomfortable to see. Another one, are okay to see it, but then when they think of doing something about that, they feel too small. And it's indeed because poverty is really huge. But there is the third group who are okay to see it and who break that problem into small ones and try to do something small, and are not afraid basically to start something by themselves, even it's a small step. So really don't be afraid and start small. It can be anything. And then last thing, which I think is also relates to the to my previous message, is remember that giving back is nicer than receiving. So don't be afraid to start it.
Thank you. I think that that fits pretty well with what we have in our statements that no contribution is too small. So
Exactly.
and if we talk it
Totally
through
agree.
together, it's very likely less steeper. Agna, thank you very much for taking the time. I think it was a great story, and I really hope that can inspire others to do the same. And whenever you feel that you want to share more stories with us, we are always here to listen to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Roy, for being here. And yeah, thanks for listening.